All right, so we have a update to the California recall election storyline that I've been following for a few months now, ever since it became kind of final that it was happening and people started jumping in the race. Today we're going to cover a few things from the number of signatures that have been rescinded as far as people signing the actual recall petition to a very recent change in rules for the recall election coming up by Gavin Newsom and his administration and the legislator, who are the ones that are being recalled, but that'll be we'll talk about that more in a few seconds. Also, we have an official date for the recall election, which we'll touch on towards the end. And then at the end, I will go through the list of recent additions to the lineup of candidates for the recall election to replace Gavin Newsom, who is the current governor of California. So, with that being said, let's jump into it right now. And if you're new here, my name is Nick Zangl, coming to you live from California on this Friday at 6 p.m. local time. And if you are here live, make sure to leave any of your thoughts or comments in the live chat, and I will check periodically to read your chats and respond to any questions or comments or give my 2 cents. And if you are listening or watching on the replay on YouTube or Rumble or on a podcasting platform, thank you so much for listening to the replay, and make sure to comment where you can as well. So I think I have everything that I wanted to say so far. So let's jump right into the first part, which is the news of the number of rescinded recall election petitions, which I want to get to an article here really quick, which is from the California Globe. And let me get that one up really quick here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. If you're joining live, like I said, make sure to say hi in the chat, and I will get to your comments and whatnot as it happens. All right, we have the article here. Let me make sure you can see it. All right, perfect. All right, so this was an update from the California Globe by Katie Grimes. This is June 10th, 2021, so about a month ago. But it appears that only 36 California voters who signed the Recall Gavin 2020 recall petition have opted to remove their signatures. Now, Susan Walsh, I'm going to be reading from this article, so this is all quote from there. Susan Walsh, who is a senior volunteer with the RecallGavin2020.com campaign, contacted every county election office in the state following the June 8th deadline and asked how many recall petition signers removed their names. She said, quote, "I was worried at first that the numbers would be in the thousands." However, on earlier calls, Walsh told that to the Globe, and then in earlier calls, Walsh noticed the exceedingly low number of rescinded signatures. So to qualify this recall for the ballot, 1,495,709 signatures were required. The recall petition gatherers turned in 2,161,349 signatures. Of those, 1.7 million were validated by the Secretary of State, and this left a cushion of 224,000 extra signatures. So we'll get into the change to the recall law in a second, but there is some talk to that here. But what she went on to say here is, weirdly, several counties that refused to provide the numbers: Alameda County, San Bernardino, Merced, Stanislaus County, San Diego County, and Los Angeles County did not provide the numbers of rescinded signatures. Merced and Stanislaus counties claimed that they have until June 22nd to turn the report in, despite Walsh telling them that June 8th was the deadline. So only a few counties said they'd need to get back to Walsh. Most counties reported 0 rescinded signatures. Fresno County was the highest with 10 signatures removed. Ventura County had 5 signatures. San Francisco had 4. Sonoma County had 3. Placer, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and San Luis Obispo had 2. Orange, Santa Clara, Solano, and Tulare County had 1 signature. Now, this is the tally here, which we just talked about, out of the 50 plus counties that are in California. But Walsh did say she reported back to the Globe when the remaining counties finally reported back to her, and she reports that down here on on 6/12, so about 2 days later, she saw that Trinity County had 0, San Bernardino had 1, Mariposa County had 1, Riverside County had 2, Imperial County had 0, Los Angeles 7, Orange County 7, and so the total ended up being 54 total signers of the recall petition rescinded their signature out of 1.72 validated by the Secretary of State, which is quite remarkable in my opinion. Let me know what you think about that. I had a few thoughts on this. Let me get back to you really quick. So my thoughts on this whole thing was, hold on really quick, make sure I have this up, is what I've been saying for a long time, which is there's a lot of support for the recall. Obviously, there's more signatures turned in than needed, but I will go on to more of my thoughts on this in a few seconds after I go over the election law rule change or whatever. But it's not a guarantee that this is going to go through and be successful, and we'll touch on that in a few seconds. But the second part of what I want to talk about was the change in rules for the election, which just happened very, very recently, and I want to share my screen with you on that as well. But with a article from ABC 10, which is the ABC affiliate in Sacramento, which is the state capital, of course. And so let me add that up here. All right. So here is that. Let me make sure I'm zoomed in correctly. Oh, thanks. All right. This is titled California's recall election will cost $276 million and a recall date has been set for September 14th. So we'll touch on that more later. But this is in Sacramento. The cost of California's upcoming gubernatorial recall election has been finalized at a whopping $276 million, according to the state finance department. The cost estimates released in early June 2021 had the total at $215 million. But according to finance officials, that cost went up following the passage of Senate Bill 152, which accelerates the recall process by allowing lawmakers to skip the 30-day legislative review as long as they set aside money for counties to pay for the costs of the election. That's according to the Associated Press. So the original estimate assumed the election would happen on a regularly scheduled election date, but with SB 152, the updated estimated county by county cost for a special election came to $243.6 million plus $32.4 million to the Secretary of State's office to run the special election, which is statewide. So state Republicans have decried SB 152, which passed on party line votes, saying it essentially amounts to cheating because the Democrats urged the change would allow the election to happen as soon as possible and enable as many voters as possible to participate. Now, Assembly member Kevin Kiley said, quote, "Any child can tell you that changing the rules in the middle of the game is cheating." And another political analyst, Steve Swat for ABC 10, somewhat agreed with GOP's argument, saying, quote, "The Democrats, of course, would like to have it as sooner rather than later because they believe the governor is in a good position now. And the longer you wait, the more things can go wrong." Now, moving up the election does potentially eliminate the possibility of a disaster such as a massive wildfire that could potentially sway voters not in favor of Gavin Newsom. And it could backfire if Democrats voters are not motivated to engage in a special election. I'll have my thoughts on that in a few seconds. But this article goes on to say also after the cost for the recall was finalized by the finance department, the Secretary of State Shirley Weber also announced certification of the recall petition. So that certification was then handed off to Lieutenant Governor Eleni Koulinakis, who by law was required to set a date for the election, quote, "not less than 60 days nor more than 80 days from July 1st. So just before 2:30 p.m., someone's yelling outside. Koulinakis announced that Tuesday, September 14th would be the date of the recall election. Now, a few of the candidates that are running had quotes about what they're or in regards to this thing, but I thought the one from the California Republican Party chairwoman Jessica Millen Patterson kind of summed up what I was thinking, which is, quote, shout out to the California Democrats for manipulating their own recall rules. Now Californians only have to wait until September 14th to recall the worst governor in California history, Gavin Newsom. And so now I want to get to some of my thoughts on this whole situation with the recall rules being changed. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a second. And let's go back to these pictures. All right. So my thoughts on the whole no rescinded or very few rescinded signatures and the change in the rules are: one, so according to the petition of rescinded things or whatever, the rescinded petitions, it looks like the recall is still going to be tough for Newsom, assuming everyone who signed up or signed the recall petition shows up to the election still. Because although people aren't rescinding their signatures, it isn't a guarantee that they will all show up to the election still, because you have to be pretty convinced to change your mind or have felt duped or whatever by what you were signing in order to get to the point where you reverse your action prior to the election even happening. It also isn't a guarantee everyone who signed will show up and still vote to recall the governor. And according to the polls, which we know how much we can trust the polls at this point, it looks like it is kind of a toss-up at this point if Gavin Newsom will get enough turnout to support him for staying in office for the time being until the end of his term, or whenever, if there's another recall election that attempts to happen. But the date being announced for the recall election of September 14th is interesting because that was the earliest date the election officials said they would be ready to put on an election. And so the additional costs of moving up the election are not as big of a deal coming off of a state surplus, but this moving up the election to the earliest possible ready date for the people running the election, plus Gavin Newsom's wanting to correct an administrative mistake of him not filling out the party preference form for him being on the ballot on the recall. I think all these things are a recipe for disaster for the integrity of this election, whether it turns out the way I want it to or not. And also, I don't agree with the statement by the Democrats saying that an earlier election date will allow more people to vote, because it is in the summer period where people aren't as engaged in news and media. And the longer we give candidates and Gavin Newsom to campaign for this election, the more people, from what I understand, will know about the election. And if you care about election integrity and you want people to vote, then you would truly want as many people to be informed voters and know about the election and have it on a regular election day and to follow the rules that you set. And so I think having it in September is going to be interesting to see what the turnout ends up being, which, from my understanding, the people, or from a logical standpoint, in my view, the people who signed or went out of the way to sign the recall petition, which it's clear it's widely supported from Republicans, Democrats, Independents, across the board, a lot of people agree that Gavin Newsom is no good for the state. And I think in order for a recall election to really be legitimate, you can't just have a partisan support of it. And that appears that's kind of what happened in the last recall in 2003. But what was I saying? I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. Why am I? Oh gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. Give me 1 second. I need to take a sip. Okay, I remembered. So the Democrats are saying that they want to have the election earlier to get more people to the polls, which they probably think that's going to help them in the election. But I think that could also backfire as well, because they're saying it's going to get more people out to vote. But I think having the election in November, or around the time when a normal election season is in any year, would get more people to support it, because they're coming off the summer, like I said, where people will be more involved and whatnot, and before the holidays. But if they don't get people coming out, other than the most motivated people, which are the ones that went out of their way to sign a recall petition, that's going to be troublesome for them, because they're kind of on the defense. Because the people who signed the recall petition, all 1.9 million, even though some got rejected, or some signatures got rejected, we're all motivated. I signed it too. We're all motivated to go to this election. The problem for the Newsom administration is they need to get people who are on their side to come out to the election. So I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot by not giving themselves more time to get people out there. The problem is, from a political perspective, I think they want this election to go through, and regardless of the outcome, it just gives them more time to recover from it. Meaning, if Gavin Newsom does get recalled and replaced, it's further away from the actual election cycle in November and the 2022 midterm elections a year from now, or a little over a year from now. Also, if he doesn't get recalled, like they said, he will have ridden that wave of support and to keep him in office now, and could potentially help them in 2022. But yeah, I don't know. I guess they could be saying they really want more people to vote in this election, but they really don't want more people to vote in this election. They're kind of using that maybe as an excuse to get their way, because it's hard to, or it's bad optics to go against someone saying that they're trying to get more people to vote. But I think logically this doesn't make sense at this point, their reasoning. And I think they really want this to go away, because it has, the more people that get involved in the election, which we'll talk about in a few seconds, the more attention it gets, the more problems that happen in this election, the more attention it gets, and it could have implications in 2022 for the rest of the country. So ideally for the Democrats, they want this election to happen really quick. They want Gavin to survive it, and they don't want much attention on the election in general. That's their best case scenario from what I see. Worst case scenario is there's a lot of problems in the recall election. Maybe there's a chance, or maybe there's a question of if he survives it or not, and there's this whole played out audit or litigation drawing out the results, which could draw more attention to the race, even if he ends up surviving, to let people know that there are problems in California. And if you're across the country and you're not really paying attention to the California politics, and you see, maybe you're a Democratic voter somewhere else, and you see a Democratic governor of California possibly not surviving the recall, then you're probably thinking, well, what's going on there? Because I thought California was supposed to be this progressive, great place. Why is this happening? So it could go either way, but I think it's going to probably land somewhere in the middle. We'll see. There's a lot of factors here that are kind of up in the air. Anyways, I've rambled enough, and I'm glad I remembered my train of thought. But before I get into going over these recent additions, who are all pictured here on my thumbnail, which is right next to me, to the candidates list for the California recall, I was aware. So some of these candidates apparently announced their candidacies months ago, and in my last few updates of the recall, I didn't mention them, and I basically did not know they were running. And so I want to share this lesson with you that I've learned, because I only found out about many of these through other means of getting information, whether it be in person, someone telling me, oh, did you see this or that, because they know I'm interested in this and whatnot, or people mentioning it on non-political videos that I happen to watch. And so this kind of shows the blind spot of not diversifying your info and your news intake in the world, where we can search for anything. And so this was the blind spot of the mainstream and traditional media, from local to national, and kind of lessons for me on the future on any story I cover that I want to continue following up on, is to go out of my way to really make sure I'm covering all the bases. So with that said, I will get more into that as I'm sharing these ones. So the first one that announced his potential run, he still has, so the deadline for joining as a candidate is 1 week from today, which is Friday, the July 16th, 2021. Larry Elder, who is a conservative talk show radio host. He started in LA, gained prominence there, and then kind of went national from there. He's been around a long time. You probably see him on Fox News or conservative type programs. And he said last week he's very strongly considering joining the race, but I will see probably in my next update in a few weeks. We'll probably have the answer by then, because obviously the deadline is next week. So he's the first one that kind of announced his intention. And then we had Real House husband of OC, even though he's only a spouse of Vicki Gunvalson. This is Steve Lodge, who announced that he is running for governor of California, and he sees himself as a conservative, and he wants to save California. Now, you're probably wondering, maybe you've heard that name Lodge before, or Steve, or you've seen him before, or maybe you've watched a show, but you're not sure if he's related to someone or whatnot. And his brother is actually Roger Lodge, who currently hosts the Sports Lodge on a radio show on KLAA, which is the MLB baseball team Angels, their flagship radio station. But his brother Roger Lodge has hosted game shows and done guest appearances on things and whatnot. So if you're wondering how that relates, that's what it is. And he is a former homicide detective, I believe, in Orange County. So that's what his deal is. But the next guy who announced their candidacy this week was... Oops. Why isn't this working? Hold on one second. Okay. Hold on one second. Why is my picture not changing? Okay, there we go. Okay, this is Kevin Kiley, who is a current state congressman, or state assemblyman, I should say, who is a Republican, who announced his candidacy this week. And it appears from what I've been reading that a lot of people wanted him to jump in the race to kind of give more options to California voters, even though he is not necessarily that well known. He was in the news for combating Gavin Newsom's lockdown orders as a response to the pandemic, and filed stuff against him. So that's what he's known for, but he jumped in the race. And then we had also former congressman from California, Representative Doug Ose, who is a Republican as well. And apparently he announced his candidacy months ago, but it obviously didn't make any significant news other than like very specific political circles or news sites. And so this was one of those blind spots with the local and national media. They didn't really cover this from my perspective because they're trying to avoid that this, or trying to pretend like this election isn't even happening. But I think if this election does not go in Gavin Newsom's favor, it'll be a huge wake-up call to the rest of the country and be a real sign of what could be to come for the 2022 midterm elections. Considering if California is unhappy with their Democratic governor, then we could see some House seats flip in California from Democrat to Republican or independent, whatever. And we know that the House of Representatives on a federal level is very close in between Republican and Democrat. And so that could be very interesting. And I will say, I was going to say this at the end, but I'll say it now. 2022 and 2024 we have one Senate seat in California up for federal government. And so this recall election comes right before the midterms of 2022 and will most likely be the next election after 2022 for governor, from 2024 for president. And so lots going on. I know people who know California and have been here saying there's no way that we'll ever have a Republican or a non-Democrat governor or a non-Democrat senator for these kind of statewide elections. But if people are unhappy enough, and you never know. So we'll see. But the final guy who announced his candidacy was Meet Kevin, who is actually a YouTuber who covers like finance and news and politics. He has over 1 million subscribers, and I actually knew who Meet Kevin was a while ago. And I found out about him through the Graham Stephan show, who Graham Stephan is another finance guy on YouTube. He worked for the real estate company that was featured on Netflix's Selling Sunset, which I've touched on my channel last year. And I did not know he was running for governor until I think it was last night. I was watching Graham Stephan, a couple of his episodes that I hadn't watched because I was catching up, and they were episodes from about a month ago, and he talked about it, saying that he didn't like to get, Graham said he didn't like to get political, but he's supporting his friend Meet Kevin, who's running for governor. And I was like, wait, what? How did I not know he was running for governor? And so I looked it up and I was like, wow, that's true. I completely missed that. 2 months ago, he announced it. So interesting about Kevin is he is running as a Democrat, which from what I understand might be the only one so far that is running as a Democrat to defeat a Democrat. So should be very interesting. And so that just shows that Democrats maybe don't like Newsom as much either. But I think him running as a Democrat could be an advantage, considering Newsom, like I said, may not be on the ballot if he doesn't get his wish to fix his mistake. He may not be on the ballot as a party-affiliated person. And so at this point, in my opinion, especially in California, it may be an advantage, even though I'm not really of the opinion anymore that being affiliated with any party guarantees anything from a candidate. I think Meet Kevin is smart for running as a Democrat, whether he did it because he's been a Democrat his whole life or he's doing it to kind of give him an advantage, knowing of that mistake by Gavin Newsom. So that'll be very interesting to see. And I may touch more on that mistake by Gavin Newsom, but I guess I could just make the comments right here really quick. But I think it's fascinating that they're so worried about Newsom not having a party affiliation on him on the ballot, because it shows to me that they do rely on blind party affiliation for support. And this will be, I think, a true test of that if Newsom ends up not having the party on his ballot, considering that rule, which is really funny, that rule that he missed and that he didn't follow or whatnot, that he's trying to get an exception to, is actually a rule that was part of legislation that he himself signed. And so I think it's very funny that he signed something that he didn't quite understand or didn't appear to understand, and now is trying to fix the mistake of him not filling out something that he, in time for what he signed into law as far as the deadline for that. But it is what it is, but we'll see how that shakes out, if it has any effect on him. And also, if he wasn't worried about his chances and he knew he was prominent in California and well-liked, I don't see why that would make a difference. But I digress. Maybe we'll go more into that next time. But my final thought on this whole election process is that some of these people may not think they have a chance as far as the election goes. But, oh, hey, okay, I see someone here in the comments. Let me see. Hello, Ben Doberman. Thanks for being here. You might have to go back and watch, because I'm going to wrap up pretty soon. But you can go back and watch the replay. But basically, I wanted to say that a lot of these people might be putting their names out there for the 22-24 Senate and House seats, like I said before, because it appears that the field this time, compared to what I've been seeing for the 2003 election that happened, where it was kind of a circus, if you will, where there were some people who were serious, but there was a lot of people who were just doing it for publicity, for their entertainment purposes or their businesses or whatever. I don't see a lot of that in this race so far. It looks like the people involved want to help California, because we're in a worse state, I think, now than in 2003, and have a chance and have experience, a mix of experience, but also are willing to put forward good ideas and not just kind of doing it to kind of feel things. At least that's what I get the impression now, but we'll see if anyone else jumps in. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up here. Let me know any thoughts you have if you're listening or watching the replay, or if you join late and you're watching the replay, still give your thoughts. I would love to reply in the main comment section. I plan on doing another update probably in a few weeks before the end of this month, so make sure to stay tuned for that, and I will have all my other content as well. So if you're interested in hearing more and seeing more from me, make sure to click around the channel, whether you're on YouTube, on Rumble, or on a podcasting platform where the audio is available. And with that said, I will talk to you in the next one. Bye-bye.